Side podcast. My name is Deb Drick. I am the chair of the Livingston County Republican Party, and my special co-host tonight is none other than Carolyn Henry, who is Livingston County's chief prosecutor. Welcome, Carolyn. Thanks for coming. Glad you're here with us. Before we go into we have a guest coming in here shortly, but before we do that, I'd like to hear what's going on in the prosecutor's office.
Excellent. Thank you so much for inviting me to co-host with you tonight. I certainly enjoyed the first time I was on the podcast with you, so here I am for my second appearance.
I did too. You did great. So
it was a lot of fun, and I had a great opportunity to talk with people about my prior appearance. And so when you asked me to be here tonight, it was without a doubt that I would say yes, absolutely.
Awesome, great.
So prosecutor's office is going great. We have had a couple of cases before the courts that we have been successful in as far as trials.
Okay.
Just in general, everybody's working real hard, very diligent, and I have nothing negative, nothing bad to report. So
good.
We are doing very well.
We expected nothing less, so good to know. And I understand you were a victim of a crime yourself recently.
I sure was.
Tell us about that.
I sure was, yeah. So my mailbox got taken out by somebody who decided to drive through our front yard and took out our mailbox. And I think just based on the evidence that they left behind, I think my repairs on my mailbox were a little less expensive than the repairs that were going to be necessary to the car that hit it. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes karma is instant, It's not always, but good to know.
It was a good repair. It gave me an opportunity to have my son come back home and help me put the post back in the ground.
And things we do to get our kids back home.
Exactly. So we got to have dinner with them. So it was
good.
very nice.
Good. Well, we appreciate that everything's been bandaged up. Do you have some sort of protector there now to keeping the next idiot from hitting it?
Well, everybody said I should build a brick enclosure around the mailbox, and I understand that people frown on that. Yeah. The United States Postal Service says no, we can't do that. But our road in general has been victim to whoever's taken out our mailboxes. So a
couple of nice big steel poles, cemented next to it.
Right.
Yeah, that'll stop anybody.
Well, and I guess it was good for a couple of days. I didn't get the bills that arrive all the time in the mailbox. So gave me a break from the bills.
All right. Well, then in that case, you know what? That's you. Always look at the sunny side of things. All right, we're gonna go for commercial here, and we're gonna come back with our special guest. Let's go to commercial here.
John Adams warned that the Constitution is wholly inadequate without a moral and religious people. As conservatives, we must reclaim the faith that shaped it, rooted in Jesus Christ and the Bible. To help you understand the historic Christianity that our country was founded on, check out theexaltedchrist.com, a resource website proclaiming Christ as King.
Why should you join the Livingston County Republican Party?
Why, you ask?
Yeah, why?
Why join?
The Republican Party is the party of common sense.
Common sense.
Republicans support the Constitution.
Republicans protect your rights.
We fight to keep your children safe.
We fight to keep boys and men out of girls and women's sports.
We fight to keep boys out of girls' restrooms.
We fight for you.
What does the Republican Party do?
We help Republican candidates get elected.
Why is it important to elect Republicans?
Why is that important?
Why? Tell me, why is that important?
Livingston County is one of the safest counties in Michigan.
Livingston County has one of the lowest crime rates in the state of Michigan.
Livingston County has the lowest tax millage rate of all 83 counties.
Republicans work to balance the budget.
Republican legislators vote against raising your taxes.
Republican elected officials believe in transparency.
Republican clerks run elections with integrity.
Republican trustees protect your rights.
Republicans support our veterans.
Who can join?
If you are conservative, we want you in our party.
All conservatives are welcome at our table.
Join our activities.
Join the fun.
Become a member.
Join us now.
Hi, I'm Deb Drick, Chair of the Livingston County Republican Party. Our conservative message has been very well received in Livingston County, and I'm so happy to share with you that people are stepping up right and left to help. The only thing's missing is you. Come join our mission. Come join our fun. Go to livingstonrepublicans.com and click join. You'll be glad you did.
And we're back once again, and I am happy to, actually, Carolyn, I'm going to ask you to introduce our guest tonight.
Sure, I am thrilled to have my friend, my colleague, and my fellow elected prosecutor from Eaton County join us here today, Doug Lloyd. I am so happy to have you here to join us on the Right Side podcast, and welcome to Livingston County. I know you've been here before, but just thrilled to have you here as our special guest tonight.
Well, thank you very much, Carolyn, and thank you, Deb, for allowing me to be here tonight. It's great. It was wonderful to come out to the Livingston County Republican Party. I felt like I was going through Eaton County a little bit, traveling in the back roads to get here.
So a lot of those.
So that was very nice, and I'm just happy to be here.
Well, tell us about yourself, Doug.
Yeah, I'll give you a little history about myself.
Please do.
A little curious fact, I was actually born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada, is where I grew up at. Great mom and dad out there, and then I decided to actually come out to Michigan for law school. Did that in 1989, and while I was in law school, I ended up meeting my future wife, and we both graduated law school, and then she took the prosecutor route. I decided that I wanted to go be a defense attorney.
Oh boy.
I went...
Interesting things to eat dinners.
Oh yeah. It made for great conversations for us, and so she went to Jackson County, and I started practicing in the Lansing area, and I did that for about 3 years, and then she moved up to Ingham County, and I was actually offered a job by the current prosecutor, or the then prosecutor in Jackson County, to see if I wanted to be a prosecutor. I went down there and I fell in love. I stayed there from 96 to 2000, and we were living up in Eaton County, and so made the decision to see if Jeff Sauter would hire me up in Eaton County, and he did, and so in 2000 I started there, and I've been there ever since. I became the elected in 2013, and
okay.
Yes.
Wow. Well, that's awesome to know. And you and your wife have children?
We do.
Okay.
We have 2 boys.
Okay.
They're Grand Ledge High School graduates up there in Grand Ledge, and they both went to MSU. So
go green.
Go white.
Yeah.
They're
Go
both
blue. Hold on.
Well, they went to MSU, so
right.
They're Spartans, and I am not a Spartan, but I did pay the bills.
All
so
right.
somehow I feel like
we accept you.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a part of it somehow.
We appreciate you.
Yes.
All right. So, well, I understand you did a thing. You want to tell us about something? How was your day today?
My day was amazing. Actually, I'll take it back a while.
Okay.
Yeah, I've had a desire for a while to actually help the state of Michigan.
Okay.
I've been the elected for almost 13 years here in Eaton County, and I believe in Eaton County, and I think it's a great county to be in. But I haven't liked the way that things have progressed at the state level. When I was
or haven't progressed.
Well, haven't progressed is the word.
Right.
As a past president of the Prosecutors Association, it was my responsibility to go up there and bang my head against the Capitol walls and try to explain to legislatures that the criminal justice reform was being great for defendants, but wasn't doing anything for victims.
Right.
No one wanted to listen. I watched our current Attorney General sit silently on the sidelines when it should have been her standing there with me, saying that, hey, these new laws just aren't right when we're talking about victims, and it didn't happen. So the last few months I've been doing my due diligence, and And I believe that I found the path that will lead me to victory. So today I filed as the Republican candidate for Attorney General.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Awesome. All right, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
All right. We now have a primary, folks. So, well, all right. Then that's great to know. It's good to know that we've got some hardworking people interested in that position and willing to serve. So tell us, Doug, how you. I'm going back to you said you want to be the kind of the people's attorney, or you want to help the state. Tell us, maybe give us some of the ways some of the changes you'd like to make, or some of the things you'd like to do as Attorney General.
Sure. Well, what I like to reflect on is that there's 83 county prosecutors. Mm-hmm. Carolyn, myself, we're each one of them. We take care of our counties. That's our responsibility. And, one of the things that when I sit there, and I've talked to a lot of prosecutors recently, and when I talk to them, one of the things we talk about is that it's really important. You have a great sheriff here, Mike Murphy.
Yes, we do.
And, and I know Mike really well. And when we talk about things, we don't go out and say, we're going to prosecute Joe Blow. We never use a name.
Right.
We always talk about that if we're going to do something, we're going to go investigate a crime.
Okay.
That's how things work. We don't actually seek the crime out. We actually look for the crime that has happened. And that has been something that has been at the federal level and the state level has been occurring in these last few years that is just not right. If you go and you ask Carolyn, or you go ask the elected prosecutors, we don't seek a person's name. We don't even want to know a person's name until we've actually read the facts of the case and made the determination, is there a case there to actually be taken to the courts? And so when somebody leads by going to a pulpit and saying that they're going to prosecute somebody, that's not how a prosecutor works. And so I'd like to bring it back to how it should be. There's 10 million people in this state. The Attorney General is supposed to represent all 10 million. Mm-hmm. There has been extreme failures in that happening. And there's been too many things. Lawfare was not a word that I understood a few years ago. I don't think those of us as prosecutors had ever heard it. But it's a word a lot of people know now. We shouldn't be going after political prosecutions. We should be going back to how it's supposed to be, which means you actually look at the evidence of a case that's brought to you, make the determination whether the facts are there to charge, and then at that point, you actually proceed forward. Only then would you disclose a name, not in the beginning before you even knew the facts of the case.
Okay. What other rough edges, I guess, do they have there that you might want to polish?
Well, that's the thing, right, is that the Attorney General, a lot of it gets focused on the criminal prosecutions that they do. But you have to understand that the Attorney General, when they say they are the chief law enforcement officer, they are. Mm-hmm. And they are responsible for all of the government agencies. They have 400 people in the Attorney General's office. Technically, it's the largest law firm in the state. And they have the responsibility to represent all departments in the government. And that means that every department, whether it's DNR, whether it's Eagle, whether it's the Treasury, there's assistant attorney generals that are assigned to those units to actually represent those units. And so that needs to be looked at as far as what are we doing here in the state? How are those people being used? As far as the individuals that are actually working, what are they doing? How are they spending their time? That is something that, from my experience of actually being an elected official, I understand. I understand that there's only so many hours in a day. Carolyn and I both understand that there's only so many people that we have. We have to be able to use our time better and not waste it. It's the taxpayers' dollars, and while there's a lot of good things that happen in the Attorney General's office, there's a lot of things that could be changed around and made better.
Awesome.
If I may, I think just in general, me being a new prosecutor, I've had an opportunity obviously to work with our previous elected David Reeder, and then as an elected right now, I've had an opportunity to just watch some of the work, Doug, that you've done for Eaton County over the years, some of the cold cases that you've prosecuted, what your work has been and your voice has been in Lansing just in general. And I am so thankful for the work that you've done for victims of crime. Is that going to continue when you're elected as Attorney General?
Yeah, in reality, when I was the president of PAM, that's actually was my platform, was victims, Carolyn, and thank you for asking. To me, that's one thing that, a lot of people seem to forget. You constantly hear about, well, we need to change things for defendants. We need to make lives better for defendants. And those of us who have actually been at the county level and been prosecutors understand that, there's a lot of things out there that will help defendants. The goal is always that if a defendant enters the system, we want to take them through that system, and we want, when they come out the better side, they're going to be a better individual. But when you're talking serious crime, when you're talking sexual assaults, when you're talking murder, there are victims and there are family of victims that are never going to recover. And so when we sit there talking about, well, let's make the defendants' lives better, I have victims that approach me all the time that say, well, what about me? Because, see, that's the one thing you have to think about. A judge, they went to school in order to get to that position.
Right.
A defense attorney, a prosecutor, they went to school, Deb, to get to that position.
Agreed.
Well, a defendant, we got to believe that he did something to get himself in that courtroom. But there's that one person, there's that victim who was never asked, hey, do you want to participate with what everybody else is doing? No one asked them if they wanted to participate.
That's a good point. I don't think I've ever looked at it that way, but you're right.
Yeah,
they got drafted. They didn't get there on scholarship.
That's right.
They got drafted.
They got drafted,
That's
and
right.
then they get told that you're not actually allowed to speak until spoken to. So the local prosecutors, your prosecutor Carolyn, myself, we're the speakers of the victims. We're the ones who stand up and speak for the victims, because there's only certain times, if they testify or at a sentencing, that they actually get to speak. And that gets lost. And, you look at the legislation that's come out in the last 10 years, there'll be multiple pages of legislations of how the legislatures have decided to change the defendants' lives. And then the last line will always say, let's not forget that victims actually have constitutional rights. But yet, in all those pages of beforehand, they had forgotten about the victims.
Okay. So how will you take that? How will you take that and apply it as Attorney General across what is the application process there?
Well, that's the amazing thing, is that we have all these great prosecutors out there. Now, these prosecutors want to have the ability to actually do what is necessary in their county. That's what they were elected to do.
Okay.
And so the AG isn't supposed to come in and actually step on their toes. We're supposed to be there for support. Okay. If they have a conflict, if they run into a crisis of personnel, then the Attorney General's office is there to step in. A perfect example is that we're there to help and take on large cases. Recently, I talked to a prosecutor who was in one county. She mentioned to me that this ring, basically a RICO, so an action where people had crossed county lines and were stealing cars and stealing parts, had done all these things. And the resources that these 3 small counties were going to have to take in order to prosecute this case was going to be astronomical. It was going to affect their budget. And so their request was, would the Attorney General help? Would the Attorney General take over this case, because the Attorney General has the ability to wrap cases in the state, because they are the state's attorney. And unfortunately, this current Attorney General said no. All 3 of you counties must do it individually. And the price and the time that those counties paid in order to do those cases was just causing me to just shake my head, because there were victims in that matter, and those victims weren't going to be represented. They were, by the best of their ability, by the individual attorneys, but not in the way they could have been.
Okay. Well, let me take a little short here and just recognize some of our viewers. Well, you might be a great prosecutor, Doug, but then Mr. Hewitt here decides that Carolyn is the best ever. So
Thank
we're
you,
going to say that. We have Greg O'Neill, who is, hello, Greg, good evening from Conway Township. Deborah Day sends her love and says Livingston County doesn't do that. And I'm assuming she means she doesn't do the stuff you said some prosecutors do wrong. So we don't do that. And then we have our Wayne County viewer here, who is, I tease him and tell him he's exactly 50% of the Wayne County Republican Party. That comes out here and he watches our show. And he came in a little late. Is this gentleman running for Michigan Attorney General? Well, Mark, that's what you get for being late. I'm not going to tell you now. No, I'm joking. Yes, he is. He is, and we're glad that you're here joining us. So yeah, we get a little, we spread around the state with this podcast. So, all right, we're
it's
on.
good to see somebody here from Wayne County.
Yes, we have.
I think the first time I was on, we were still growing our audience. So it is so nice to see this expanding.
We about 3 weeks ago, was it 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago, we crossed 20,000 views. So we're faster. We're faster than I ever thought we would. So it just shows you what a hunger there is for news that says the whole picture. So, all right, Doug, interruption back to you. So, what do you think? What personal qualities do you have, or professional? Let's say personal and professional qualities. Start with personal qualities. Do you have that will kind of support you in this new role?
Personal qualities.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, I'm going to have to mix the two because anymore, I've been an attorney for 35 years, been a prosecutor for 30.
Okay.
So when you look at that, it's hard to mix the personal and professional because, when my kids were little and the teachers would ask them, what does your dad do for a living? They said he puts the bad guys in jail. I was always comfortable with that because that at least that let them know that to them, I was on the good side.
Sure.
And that's really, how I think. Most prosecutors look at themselves as really the original public defender. You always hear about, there's public defenders out there. Well, I refuse to call them that because those individuals that represent criminals, they're not public defenders. They don't represent the public. They represent individuals in the community who committed a crime.
That's true.
Now, the prosecutor, they're the original public defenders because if you were to ask Carolyn, you ask the prosecutors around the state, every police jurisdiction gets funneled to Carolyn's office, gets funneled to my office. Mm-hmm. Only if we decide that case has the merits to actually go to a court do we release that case. On average, 25 to 30%, Carolyn, I'd ask you if that number seems fair to you. That amount of cases gets denied or sent back to the police agencies. And that's why I call us the original public defender, because we're the ones making sure that if the facts aren't there, it goes back to that very beginning. Doesn't matter what the individual's names are. If the facts aren't there, we better not be sending our case through. We have responsibilities as a prosecutor to not do that. So for me, I bring that to the table, that I actually understand that you are supposed to look at the facts of the case, whether it be criminal, whether it be civil. Now, I've spent enough time, in the Eaton County Prosecutor's Office. One of my first jobs there was I was the drug prosecutor. Then Jeff Sauter, who was the prosecutor at the time, longtime prosecutor in Eaton County, he started an economic crime unit. Basically, and he brought me in to run it. Basically, the philosophy is that there's crimes out there that are being committed. Bad checks is one of them. Mm-hmm. Bad checks is a case, that you can actually go to jail on. But there's only so many police officers out there, and they didn't have time to do anything about it. But yet businesses were coming to us and saying, hey, we're losing money.
Right.
So Jeff and I actually came up with this idea of let's start the economic crime unit. The economic crime unit basically is that we were going to give people the opportunity to pay back the merchant any bad check fees and all that they had, to actually pay a small fee to the county to be a participant in the program. And if they didn't, we weren't going to charge them with the crime. Now the difference was if they were, we were going to show them we were serious and we were going to actually charge them.
Sure.
I ran that unit for about 10 years. It's still in existence today. It's
That's innovative.
22 years old. It's helped businesses. It's returned over $9 million to area businesses in that 22 years. And it's kept a lot of people out of jail. And our success rate runs about 80% of people who never come back to the program. And so for us, that's when we're talking about the successful things you can do. So when you look around at the AG as to what does the AG do? Well, it's the senior partner of this law firm, and its real job is to make sure that everyone else is actually doing their jobs. Every department that they have is doing the jobs they need to do, that they're representing their respective departments, and that they're actually prosecuting cases that matter.
Okay. Doug, are you part of, if I recall correctly, you had worked on a board or with a group for organized retail crime?
I do.
Do you still serve on that, with that group?
Yes, Governor Snyder actually created that group in 2013. I was initially appointed onto that group, and I have just was recently reappointed by the governor to serve on that group again. So yes, and that's another great thing. Its whole job is to look at the crime throughout the state in regards to organized retail crime and figure out ways that we can help local prosecutors, as well as pushing the AG to actually take on the cases that are hundreds of thousands of dollars, because that's what the AG should be handling, is cases that are large dollar amounts.
What besides criminal law, what kind of things, just educate our audience here, what kind of things does an AG's office handle that does not reflect on criminal law?
Sure. Well, I mean, that's the thing, is that they represent the bridges. They represent DNR. They represent Eagle, which deals with waterways. They represent in regards to child support cases. There's a lot of things that would be deemed as civil, and those assistant attorney generals are actually looking at contracts. They're helping, say DNR formulate rules or formulate laws for their particular agency. So they are actually the attorneys that are responsible for government. And that's what the Attorney General does, is that it represents all agencies within the government. But it even goes farther than that. Yeah, I don't know if it's used anymore, but if you go back to the original, Attorney General, Frank Kelly, he would tell you that, the legislature, he was more than open to the legislature coming to him and helping them actually craft the bills that made sense. And
Good.
I believe that's missing.
Oh, that's needed
And
so
that's,
badly.
to me, I've had great conversations with our legislators, but they seem to have forgotten that that's available, or maybe it's been turned off. I'm not really sure, but I know when I'm Attorney General, it'll be turned back on, because I want better laws, not worse.
Good. So, in creating contracts, in prosecuting and making those decisions, that's kind of a proactive stance. Is there a reactive stance? Does the Attorney General defend areas, departments, people, business, something? Can you give us an example?
Kind of all of the above, right?
Okay.
I mean, the Attorney General has the responsibility to defend these units that I've talked about, these agencies. They defend them in lawsuits. And so that is their responsibility, is to represent and defend all of the agencies. And so that's what the Assistant Attorney Generals do for those specific agencies. They also have the ability to actually sue. And there have been times when, examples that I can give is that when the Supreme Court has decided, okay, we want an opinion, and they've asked the Attorney General to file a brief as to an opinion on a case. They've also asked the Attorney General in the past, not currently, but in the past, to give us both sides. And so the Attorney General is the only office within the state that actually could be a plaintiff and a defendant at the same time. They have the ability to actually wall off each other, separate the office, and continue to be a plaintiff and defendant, and actually file two separate briefs to the Supreme Court. And so that's the thing that has to be remembered, is that the Attorney General, as that chief law enforcement officer, has a responsibility to represent everyone.
Well, and they have a conviction integrity unit too, don't they?
They do. That was something that was created, and that's, once again, it's something that is there to determine, looking back at old cases, were the cases actually done right? An individual who is a defendant who's sitting in jail, or maybe he's gotten out of it by this point, is requesting that he didn't actually commit the crime. They have a conviction integrity unit that actually allows them to go back and do their own separate investigation, their own separate attorney who has no involvement with the rest of the AG's office, and they make a determination, was this crime actually committed, or was something terribly wrong done in it that requires it to go back to the circuit court level?
I taught Leadership Livingston here for 27 years, and one of the classes I taught was the justice system, as Carolyn can remember from her early days. A long time ago.
Being in the courtroom and doing the silly cases.
Little skits, yes.
Yeah.
But that were really meaningful to the people. But one of the things Dave Morris used to say every single year, that I think it got to everybody, because you look at a prosecutor and you think, go after the bad guys, just like you said. You think, but you're supposed to seek justice, not seek a conviction.
Correct.
Is that correct? That's what he used to tell us. It's you go after the bad guys, but you first have to seek the justice. And if he's not guilty, you can't create stuff just to get a case. You have to say, no, he didn't do it, or we don't think he did it. But so, do you take that same attitude to the Attorney General's office?
Well, I think it should already be there. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah, I mean, that's,
question asked, question answered.
Yeah, it should already be there, but
should be, yes.
I can guarantee you that when I walk in the door, it will be, because yes, a prosecutor actually has a dual responsibility, and I remember Prosecutor Morrison, yes, but not only are they supposed to make sure that a defendant is treated fairly in court, we have to make sure that all the rules are followed. And, that second aspect is that we have to make sure that the victims are actually heard. So we have dual responsibilities, but that main responsibility is not whether we win or lose. We don't count our cases in win or losings. We charge cases because we believe that we have the facts that allow us to prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt. And only then do we move those cases forward to court. And when they go into court, then it's up to the judges, it's up to the defense attorneys, it's up to the defendant. We're going to proceed forward with our case, but that determination will be made by those other parties, whether the individual pleads guilty or is found guilty by a judge or jury.
Okay, well, let me get a couple. I'm trying to stay on top of these. If you're watching and you don't see your comment, if I have not recognized your comment, that means I don't see it. Go to the Facebook page of Livingston County Republican Party, sign on there, and I should be able to see it. So somebody's husband here wants to know if you have a Facebook site or a website for your campaign, or no. But he just filed this afternoon. How prepared are you?
I am. Yeah, I appreciate that question, Jay. Your wife is very lovely. Yes, if you go to, it will be live. It is votedougloyd.com. That'll be my website. And right now I'm retooling my Facebook page. But if you're curious as to what I've been doing, you can go to Doug Lloyd Prosecutor. That is where you can see some of the things that I've done in Eaton County and what our county has done as well. You can find some things regarding the cold case that I did last year, things of that nature.
Awesome. Okay, what else do we have here? Mark wants to know if, there has been another Republican running. He's out of Birmingham. We'll talk about him. We'll have to get him at some point. Now that there's a primary, we now have to get him on here some point too. So I don't remember his name, but there is another one yet, or at least Mark says he likes what you're hearing so far. He thinks you're a good candidate. That's good news.
I appreciate
that. All right,
that,
and
Mark.
and then we have we're going to leave that up for a little bit. All right, so let's take a minute here and take a commercial, and then we'll be right back.
Bunny's Fabulous Seasoning is a fantastic new blend of herbs and vegetables made in Livingston County. Add a tablespoon to homemade breads, soups, stews, meat, poultry, vegetables, casseroles, sauces, and more. To order, email Bunny's Fabulous Seasoning at gmail.com or message the Bunny's Fabulous Seasoning Facebook page. It's time to divorce your Marry Me Chicken and take advantage of free delivery in and around Livingston County. Bunny's Fabulous Seasoning, the only seasoning you need.
Welcome to the right side. And with me now is the brand new 7th District Chair, District 3, Livingston County Commissioner Frank Sample. So welcome, Frank. You're very active in the American Legion.
Correct.
You're very active in the VFW.
This ideology is very damaging to the students who are told if you get this surgery and make do the social transition, the medical transition, then you'll be happy and all your problems will be solved. Learned so much.
I'll bet. That's some institutional knowledge right there. And we have, as a special guest, as I said earlier, we have Kevin Reiki with us. Welcome, Kevin. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Go Boge. Thanks, Kelly. There are no shortage of them. We love meeting new people.
Right, yes.
It's in good shape, so that's good news.
That safeness is not afforded to every citizen. They are special.
There's a difference between men and women. There's a biological difference, and it's time for us to stand up for our girls.
He went through, and he came back with a report said there's no way Detroit can meet its obligations on the tax base.
Yes.
So is this DEI focused just on the high school, or are they talking about all
district, the entire district?
Maybe that's kind of normal. It's really not. There tends to be little fiefdoms with different police agencies and police versus fire and fire versus EMS and blah blah blah. That's not the case here. So Livingston County is very fortunate.
Hey, not too long ago, in many of our lifetimes, Detroit was the third largest city in America.
Oh yeah,
3.2 million citizens.
It's been a great experience. I mean, I have no regrets about moving here.
There's an old saying that the road will get you elected, the jail will get you unelected. So, to give you an idea.
You have to have a reason to change for change to be enacted.
And we're back, and here we are again with Doug Lloyd, our new candidate for Attorney General, for our Michigan Attorney General. And I'm going to just take a second here based on some questions that I received that just to explain that the Attorney General and the Secretary of State are two positions, even though they're statewide, they are not the primary does not take place on the open, it's not an open primary like you would vote for a presidential primary or the primary of your prosecuting attorney for that matter. So it is in a Secretary of State and Attorney General, it is done by delegates in a convention. So you have the Republican convention and the Democrat convention, and the delegates go and they elect the Republican and the Democrat nominee. So they will do that, and then they come to from that point on they come to a general election. That's when you and I would vote, but we don't vote on a primary unless we are a delegate. So you want more on delegates, reach out to Sharon Lalio or Marcia Dix or Connie Robinson, or you can always email me. You can always email me on one of my 5,000 emails. chair@LivingstonRepublicans with an S.com, and I will answer whatever questions you have about being a delegate. But that's how the Attorney General will be elected. So just to update that. So you mentioned something that's near and dear to my heart. I worked at the legislature for 150 years, from Granholm through Whitmer, and Granholm and Snyder and Whitmer, and I've seen what happens when departments work well with the legislature. And by working well, I don't mean coming in there and doing everything they want to do, but having open conversations, listening, meeting both needs. The Attorney General's office wants this, the legislature needs this, having that open conversation. And I've also seen what happens when you have a department or an elected, they're not open to working with the legislature, and that's where things go south very quickly, because you really need one another. The Attorney General needs to make changes, and the legislature is where those changes are made. But the legislature has their needs as well, and the Attorney General needs to help with them. So, having said all that, tell us your experience and your thoughts on working with the legislature in Michigan.
Sure. I mean, that's the thing you have to think about, right? Is that when you're talking to the legislature, I figured this out. Term limits are something that we created years ago, And, you know, people either like them or hate them.
Mm-hmm.
But the one problem with term limits is that it removed institutional knowledge.
Yes, it did.
And that's the thing that people forget about or don't think about, is that once the people who actually understood why were these original bills created, you know, once they're gone, there's nobody else filling up the space. And what I noticed, especially when I was arguing in regards to victims, is that I would come to legislators and say, okay, there was a certain reason that these laws were created years ago. The prosecutors gave up certain things like mandatory minimums for drug cases. We've adjusted our sentencing guidelines, meaning that it was harder for a person to actually go to prison. And we did all of this to make sure that victims would actually be heard. And that made sense when it was done. But when you talk to legislators today, they have a 12-year window, right? And so they're in there for what they want to accomplish in 12 years. And I've literally had them look at me and say, I don't care. I'm here for me. I'm here to do this. And so that is a difficult conversation, and you need to figure out how are you going to get around that. Fortunately, by already being an elected official, I'm dealing with my own electeds and my own county commissioners on a daily basis. And we all have, Carolyn can tell you, we all have as elected officials needs at our county level. It's the same way at the state. You got to be able to get along, and you got to be able to communicate. But that means you got to get up out of your chair and be willing to go walk over to somebody else's office and knock on their door and sit down. Say, hey, let's go to breakfast, let's have a coffee. That's how things are done. That's how people actually get to know each other. That's how people work. And that's what should be done. People should want to be reaching out to the Attorney General and saying, hey, I'm not understanding this bill, or I'm not understanding the history of it. Can you walk me through it? That's the real job. It's not to be out in front of a podium. It's not to be doing press releases every day. If you're the people's attorney, then you're actually helping the people get a better life. Some of that's going to happen by the legislation that the legislature's created.
Yes, it will.
And if it's not created right, then, you know, how much sense does it make that you make a bill, you pass a bill, and then a year later you're having to go back and rewrite that bill and redo that bill? How about we just do it right the first time?
Oh my gosh.
And you've been working with the people in Lansing.
Would you say that a second time? Let me hear that again.
I have. I've worked with the people in Lansing. A lot of them that have left now, you know, are actually supporting me, you know, on this. But they were the same ones that wanted to sit down and listen. You know, the judiciary chairs, you know, the appropriation chairs. Well, Rick Jones, obviously, that was before I was really more into it. But, you know, Graham Filler from, you know, was judiciary for a long time, was judiciary when
I was going with Rick because it was your
Right, Rick, yes. Rick did the House and the Senate when he was in when he was the Eaton County rep.
I worked with his office when he was in the Senate. So I was in the Senate working too. So yeah, he was probably one of the hardest working focused senators I think I ever worked with.
Rick is definitely an elder statesman of the Eaton County Party.
What are some of the things that you've been working on in Lansing as elected from Eaton County?
Well, you know, there's one thing that I'm most proud of that's happened in the last couple of years is that I have, from the 1970s, a cold case killer. Not a cold case, a serial killer. So he killed 4 women over in Ingham County and then came to Eaton County. And Randy and Lisa were a 13 and 14-year-old boy and girl at their house, and he came into their house. He proceeded to sexually assault Lisa, and Randy walked in, and Randy was attacked. He attempted to kill Randy. He stabbed Randy multiple times, and while that was occurring, Lisa was actually able to run out the door and be found. And so, unfortunately, none of the bodies could be found in Ingham County, and so Ingham County had a very good deal for this defendant. But in Eaton County, Randy and Lisa, even at their young age, stood up and actually testified, got this guy put away for 50 years.
Oh.
And so during this time also, too, after he was convicted of having a garrote, which is a strangulation device, in prison. So more years were added on to him. Well, it came a point in 2015 that he was coming up for parole. And so myself and Randy and Lisa actually went together to the parole board to argue, along with a lot of other people who cared about the case, to argue to the parole board he should not be released. 2018, as part of this criminal justice reform, they actually made it where individuals, the parole board had the ability to say, okay, we're going to hold this guy for 5 years. We're not going to review him. Give the victims time to actually live their lives without worrying. In 2018, with the criminal justice reform, they took that away. So even a person who had been a serial killer, who had almost killed people, they were going to have to review him every year.
Oh.
Randy came to me and said, Doug, this is killing me. I have to gear up for this hearing. I get the notice that
we live the worst day of their life.
Yeah,
worst day.
Over.
And he lives it every day because he's got scars.
Sure.
Randy is a close friend, and he's got scars on his chest that he sees every morning, when he gets out of the shower. But he'd go through this hearing, the parole board would say no, and then he'd get to live his life for 3 or 4 months. Then the notice would come, we have to review him again. So I actually reached out to Sarah Leitner, who was in my district, and in all credit, Angela Whitwer, who's a Democrat, was in my district as well. But I've known Angela since she was on the Waverly School Board in my district, and I reached out to the two of them and said, this isn't right. Those two got together, and you want to talk bipartisan, that was bipartisan. Because they brought it forward that said if all of the parole board voted yes, then they could suspend it for 5 years. And they brought this legislation forward, and they got it passed both at the House and at the Senate, and then the governor signed it. And,
awesome.
And now Randy, we went through the next one in 23, and he doesn't have to think about it until 28.
Oh, that's awesome.
What a
that's
great voice for the victim.
Yes.
I mean, you truly changed his life
I
and their
did.
family.
But I have to give the blessings to Randy, because Randy was a quiet individual who never wanted to talk about this, and for some reason I managed to bring him out of his shell. And it was Randy and I who went to the House, and it was Randy and I who went to the Senate, and he literally got up there and testified and told his story. And there's no better story that's going to be told than by the victim who actually managed to survive a serial killer.
But still, that is still something you had to think of, and you had to create, and you had to reach out to the right people. So that's good news for me, because like I said, that was a personal experience I had, and I saw when it worked well, and I saw when it didn't. Sure. And it was a nightmare. And the people of Michigan do not, no matter what, they do not deserve a stalemate or a stagnant relationship between one of the either the Attorney General and the Secretary of State and the legislature, or the governor for that matter. But that's more political than anything. But still, for your office or for the Secretary of State's office, that needs to work well with the legislature. And if they can't, then there's a problem. So I'm encouraged to hear that. What priorities might you have going into your Attorney General position?
Well, for me, the core values are really to make sure that we're actually moving forward correctly. I'm a big fan of being, from the local prosecutor level, that you actually have to do things right when we're talking about the criminal justice. Now, when you're talking about civil cases and you're talking about the assistant attorney generals representing those individual departments, they're looking at contracts to make sure that the DNR is moving into the best contract it can with a separate, outside contractor. They're looking at that. If the DNR is involved in a lawsuit, then they're looking at representing the DNR in regards to that lawsuit. When you're talking about the criminal justice side, which is what you hear about all the time, at least with this Attorney General, you have to be looking at it that there is a right way and a wrong way to do it. To begin a case in front of the podium is a wrong way. There are prosecutors, and almost every prosecutor uses it, is a letter that they send out to their local law enforcement each year, reminding law enforcement that we have ethical duties, that it's our job to actually not talk about a case until we put that case in front of a jury. And so when you see an elected official just hopping out in front of a podium before an investigation's even been done, to me, that's not how it's supposed to be. There's plenty of ways these days to be on social media. Just putting it out there when you're violating the ethical rules is not the way to do it. So for me, that core value is to start there, to actually bring some integrity back to the Attorney General's office, to offer that support to the local prosecutors, because they're all hurting as far as people and the amount of cases they're receiving, and that's one of the responsibilities that they have. And then to make sure that we're actually handling our work within the government correctly, that we are representing our agencies that we need to, and making sure that the things that we are doing are correct.
I just want to build on that, though. Isn't there a recent policy that, I mean, I know there is because we've talked about it often, but as it relates to state or investigations regarding state officials and the AG handling those, and if you could explain what's going on with that and what you may or may not do differently.
Sure. Back in 2024, the colonel for the Michigan State Police decided to change a directive that said that any state official that was found committing a crime here in the state of Michigan, while before that crime would have been sent to the local county prosecutor, the ones that you elect. Now, every one of those that is a felony had to be sent to the Attorney General. Now, they tried to quantify it that it was really about officer shootings, that if an MSP officer shot a person, that all MSP officer cases should be sent to the Attorney General. And they tried to argue that they were going for consistency. Nope. Even though that's not how the 83 counties run, we are all unique. And we've all elected our county prosecutor on the belief that that county prosecutor is best to know his community. But in reality, what it means is that, in Eaton County, I have a lot of state offices. If I have a state, employee who's driving a company car, decide to go out and have a few too many pops at lunch, and he gets stopped for drunk driving, if it's a misdemeanor, it's coming to my county. But if it's his third alcohol offense and it's a felony, it's going to the Attorney General. Now, how is that transparent and how is that consistent?
It's not, that's for protection.
Yes.
They get to choose who to prosecute and who not to based on it. And it isn't going to be based on the case. It's going to be based on the letter.
And we know our communities.
Exactly.
I think that was the issue.
Exactly, Carolyn. And to your question is what would I do? I've been on the radio and I've been on our local stations up in Lansing, and I've been quite clear that, I'm the elected prosecutor for Eaton County. That is my responsibility, not hers. An Attorney General is there to support. I'll give a great example that if there is an officer shooting, and let's say it just happened to be, Carolyn's brother, well, she'd probably have a conflict in that. And so that would be a time that if the elected prosecutor has a conflict, then no one else in her office can take the case. It must move to a different agency, and the agency is the Attorney General's office. It's our job to then take on that case and either keep the case and review it or move it to a different elected prosecutor. And so that's when we help and support. But to take away the case from Carolyn when she had no conflict, that's her responsibility. You elected her to do that job. Eaton County elected me to do that job. And for that to be taken away, I don't want to see that done, and I won't see it done as the Attorney General.
And I appreciate that. I think that's a huge within our discussions for prosecutors in many, many counties. That has been discussed, and it's a big issue.
So what happens, in the other sense, what happens when there's overreach by a department? What happens when there's a lot of flavor over the last few years where the DNR has a lot of accusations, and I'm not going to make a judge or jury, but this many, I gotta believe, some of them have some sort of merit, that the DNR has a tendency to overreach, doing a lot of things that they shouldn't. You've got assistant prosecutors that are going to be defending them. What happens when they're wrong?
Sure, and that's a great question, especially because we just had Ted Nugent up there talking about the DNR at the legislature.
Gonzo!
And yes, we did. And so, obviously what Ted Nugent was talking about was the rules and the laws. Some of that is what the Attorney General's office actually deals with. So the assistant attorney generals that are dealing with that actually have the responsibility to look at those and go, okay, looks like you may be overreaching with this. We're going to counsel you as their attorney that this is something that you shouldn't do. Now, obviously, the DNR has their own department
That's
as
right.
well. You know, they have their own department of heads, so they can say no. I would expect, just as I do now, that if my assistant attorney general was, disagreeing with a department head and was counseling them one way and they weren't being listened to, that's going to go up the chain as far as to hire assistant attorney generals to determine, are we going to get involved to counsel ourselves? Now, when you talk about the local level, DNR, when they work in the county, they're bringing their cases to the local prosecutor.
Right.
Local prosecutor knows best as to how they're going to prosecute that case.
Sure.
And, once again, it falls back to that the DNR can say that, you baited, but it's going to be up to Carolyn to make the determination by looking at the facts. Did it actually happen?
Right.
Did you do something wrong?
That's not overreach, though. That's what they do.
Right.
But I guess my big question is then, let's say, and the big one was the DNR going in and stepping too far. I worked for representatives up in the UP, and this is a big problem up there. They just run wild, and in basically going in places that they're not supposed to go or doing things. And you go and counsel them, don't do that anymore. Would you then it doesn't work, would you then take a further step and work with the legislature to put in a policy that they cannot do that?
Obviously, if there's something there to, I have my limits on that, but if I'm seeing something, on that, or if the legislature from the U.S.
It's overreach,
right, if there's overreach, because that's really the thing. If that overreach is happening, that's the legislature's job. Their job is to get out there and create those laws and rein in the DNR, or bring them in before the Senate or the House and actually speak to that department. When I'm talking about that I'm representing them, I'm representing them on contracts and things like that within their department. That's the Attorney General's job. But we also have the ability to look at things as well. On that, we are the only agency that has the ability to not only defend but sue.
That's right. So my thought is, like I said, and I know what goes on up at the UP with the DNR, and it's just a mess up there. So my thought was, I just wondered if there was a point where it was. Yes, you're right. The legislature could come in, but they also having the support of they would reach out to the Attorney General and say, look, this is your department, and what can we come up with, what kind of bumper guards or boundaries can we put in place here that protects people's rights just as much as it protects, we understand the DNR has a job to do, but they can't trample people's rights to do it, and I think that's a problem. All right, we have a question for you from Leanne Luigi. Do you support having a juvenile detention center in Livingston County? At this time, we send out all our juvenile detention kids out of county.
What do you think about that, Jen?
Is that an Attorney General situation?
I know.
It's not, but it's a local county prosecutor, right? And I mean, obviously, Leanne, I would leave that up to your prosecutor, but I can tell you that we have had a small detention center. I'm sure you have the same thing. And we just recently, by actually receiving a state grant, were able to create a new $10 million facility in Eaton County that, the current probate judge is actually a former, assistant prosecutor of mine. She loves it. My assistant prosecutors love the new unit. So, yes. If you have the ability, Leanne, but that's really what has to happen, and that's once again talking about at the local level.
Yep.
You got to convince your commissioners, you got to convince the right people. Is that the appropriate thing to do? Because I understand it's the same argument that they make about individuals that go to prison. When you're shipping them out of county, then it's harder for the families to actually see the individuals. So
agreed.
I would say take that to your local county commissioners and discuss that with them. But it doesn't hurt to have one if you can afford it in your community.
Sure.
And it's been an item of discussion, for many, many years. I think even when David Reeder, our previously elected prosecutor, when he sat as chief judge on the bench, it was being discussed back then as well. And as Doug had pointed out, it really is about the money. And there have been so many reforms in our juvenile justice system that right now they really frown upon detention as being the first line of, offense or deep, but they're really trying to work different different things into our juvenile justice program. So I think at this point, with the reforms that are going on, it would be an item of discussion that
Sure.
I don't know if we'd get real far with it.
Well, is Maxie still functioning? I don't think Maxie ever functioned as a detention center as much as it was a, kind of, you were sentenced to Maxie, not necessarily detained there.
It was a juvenile, it was a long-term juvenile placement.
Right.
And then, it does run through the Michigan Department of Corrections now.
Sure.
So it is, for different people who suffer mental illness.
Okay.
So it is still utilized.
Okay, and Leanne says thank you for that. And then we have Mark, our Wayne County friend here. If elected, I really hope you keep a close eye on Wayne County, more specifically Highland Park. A lot of corruption and gang violence there. Is there a state initiative that could be worked out through the Attorney General and state police and anybody else involved to help out help curb gang violence, drugs, that sort of thing?
Well, Mark asks a real good question there, because that is specifically what the Attorney General should be looking at. The Attorney General, when you're talking about criminal actions, part of their job is to go after political individuals who have committed crimes,
The Kwames of the world.
Yes.
Okay.
And to look after that corruption. But there are specific task force out there. Carolyn works with them at the local level, but the state police does have specific task force that deal with gang violence, that deal with corruption. And a lot of times those cases become so large or so, going over so many communities that it will become a choice, and you'll try to talk and work with the local prosecutor as to whether they would like the case or whether, the state, the Attorney General is going to take the case. And a lot of times the local prosecutor is going to go, especially in Wayne County, largest county in the state, they're going to go, I have plenty of business. If you could take this case, we would appreciate that. And that's how it works out. But the questions he asks there are specific units, just like when we talked about the organized retail crime task force. There's a specific unit that works, around the state going after individuals who are committing organized retail crime. And there are drug unit, gangs and drug units that also the Attorney General works with as well.
Back to the Leadership Livingston days when I would, have different the law community, legal community, talk about the roles. Another David Morse eye-opener was that on what's that crime show you see on TV?
Law and Order?
Law and Order, yes. Like on Law and Order, the prosecutor's office have investigators that go out there and investigate with the police, and he said, we don't. No. Police, we prosecute, we don't investigate. Does the Attorney General's office have investigation in their role, or are you a bigger source of bigger mirror of a county prosecutor where there's no investigation?
Right, yeah. You're going to find in most prosecutor offices that they do not have.
Right.
They do not have investigators.
What about AG?
The Attorney General actually does have investigators.
Okay, all right.
A lot of their cases, they're actually relying on the state police.
Okay.
Or it could be a local government, but maybe across county lines. And so it's one of those cases that we talked about that it would make more sense for the AG to take. But they do have a few investigators. It's not a lot, remembering that for the whole Attorney General's office there's 400 employees, so you're only going to have so many investigators.
Sure.
There's a few of them that can specifically work cases. Some of the cases that I've seen in the news recently that they're saying that their investigators are working, I have to question if that was the best use of resources.
Okay.
But that would be something.
Well,
as
especially because there's police units that can do a lot of that. I mean, I get that there needs to be maybe some follow up or something came up where it's a question the officer didn't see, and maybe now I got to go investigate just to see how that worked. New evidence or whatnot. So anyway, I just wondered.
But you'll
if that
hear
was any
information about like an auto theft unit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like auto theft units have been huge, and I'm sure Doug, you've had a case or 10 in your community as well. We've all suffered through them, but we really rely on the bigger investigation units through the Attorney General's office, they have assisted us in cases that we want to keep in our county, in our community. But, we want to keep that positive relationship when we do have the bigger cases, and sometimes we don't have the resources that the investigation units have at the Attorney General's office. So I know in just seeing Doug's background and working with him and how the relationships he's built, I'm confident that those relationships...
Is this an official endorsement?
I think the world of Doug Lloyd.
Okay.
I think absolutely working with him in the Prosecutors Association, I have learned immensely from him, watching what he's done through his career. Even as a defense attorney, Eaton County is not that far away. I've had some good friends that have worked with Doug, so they all speak very highly of him.
Good.
And yeah.
Good to know. We have Mark, by the way, said because of your answer to his question was so good, you have his vote. I'm hoping he wants to. He hopes he can help your campaign.
I appreciate
good
that.
news, Mark, and hopefully, if you're not a delegate, get out there.
Yeah. Get out there and become a delegate, Mark.
Very quickly.
That's exactly
very quickly.
right.
We're going to need you next year. So, all right. Well, anything else, Carolyn? Let me ask you from the local level, and this is something that I find important that I don't see often. From the local level, what could you see at the AG's office that will trickle down and help out the local office?
Well, I think Doug has touched on it in so many points that he's brought up here today with our audience today. I've seen Doug works closely throughout the state of Michigan with our prosecutors, and I think his knowledge in serving as the president of the Prosecutors Association and just getting those relationships, not just with your Republican prosecutors. Politics doesn't, when we're in the Prosecutors Association or we go to our prosecutors conferences, we're all really learning from each other. And I think statewide, Doug has really built those relationships, and he is very knowledgeable, not just about his community, but throughout the state of Michigan and the troubles that we've all experienced as sitting as elected prosecutors in our community. So I think that's going to be a great source of knowledge and just assistance as we continue for serving our communities and having him as the Attorney General.
Awesome.
And I think in general, one of the things that I've really appreciated about Doug is, again, I know I probably sound like a broken record, but his voice for the victims that he's continued just really to push in his elected position. But I think what I wanted to touch on just briefly tonight as well is, I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with the most recent Michigan Supreme Court decision as it relates to people who are serving life without parole sentences. And these are life without parole sentences that they received when they've actually killed somebody when they've been 19 years old or 20 years old. Doug, do you want to touch on that a little bit? And, I can talk all day about it, but I'm going to let you talk about it. So.
Sure. I mean, this is something that prosecutors are facing across the state. I have 6 individuals who were 18, 19, or 20 when they committed murder. And we're not talking about, a nicer kind of murder, if there is. We're talking about first-degree murder, the actual intent to want to kill someone. They did that. And our prior laws were that if you were over 17 and then it turned to 18, but if you were over that age, then if you were an adult and you killed someone, you were going to prison for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And we convicted people of that age. And we told the victims' families at that time that we'll never be able to bring your loved one back, but at least you know that you'll never have to look at this individual again.
Right.
5 Supreme Court judges determined on their own that these individuals didn't have the cognitive function to be adults, even though there are on average, 500,000 18 to 20-year-olds in Michigan, all the time. And they never murder anyone, but yet they decide, they manage to listen to their parents and go through life and not murder anyone. But yet for these 500 individuals who were of that age frame during that time, the determination was made by these 5 Supreme Court justices that we're going to upend the law, we're going to change it, and we're going to have to re-sentence these 19 and 20-year-olds. And so now Carolyn has to do it, I have to do it, prosecutors from across the state are having to look at individuals. I had to look at a wife whose husband was killed in 1986. The defendant's family lives 5 miles from her. When I sat down to tell her about this, she looked at me and said, "What am I supposed to do when I see him in Myers?" How do you answer a victim like that? What do you even say?
It's atrocious.
Yeah. A promise had been made by someone like us years ago that we couldn't fix the death, but you won't have to suffer with this again. And now they're suffering again. Victims' trauma never goes away. They bury it, they treat it however they can. They try to
how
move
is
on.
that? How can an AG? I mean, what can an AG do against a Supreme Court case like that?
Well, I mean, in my opinion, the thing that should have been done is there should have been amicus briefs filed. There were briefs that were filed by local prosecutors. There should have been comments by the Attorney General. You know, if the Supreme Court wanted to change the rules, they should have changed it going forward. They shouldn't have gone backwards to affect all of these people, you know, the victims of the world that we're now having to deal with. And that wasn't done. When I talked about in the very beginning that I've seen this current Attorney General just sit on the sidelines and be quiet when it comes to victims, true, actual victims, that's what she's done, and that's what I'll refuse to do.
Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. Leanne wants to know how they're supposed to be sentenced.
Well, now, I mean, obviously it was life without parole. Now it has to come back, and it's up to each elected prosecutor to look at your individual case and then make a determination, are you going to ask a judge to sentence with life without parole again? Whether you do, you know, if you do that, you're going to go to what's called a Miller hearing, and you're going to go to an actual hearing where evidence is going to be presented. But here's the kicker. It's not evidence about the case. More than likely, the judge that is now on there doesn't know anything about the case, doesn't know anything about the history, sure doesn't know anything about the victim that was murdered. No one cares. It's all about how the defendant was raised, what problems he had, what issues he's had, what changes have occurred, and is he able to actually get out there in society now and be a good person? So if the judge says, no, I'm not going to sentence to life without parole, then the minimum is 25 years, and it can go up to 60 years, the maximum being 40 to 60. So those are the numbers. And in all reality, Carolyn will tell you, I'll tell you, the way the Michigan, parole board has been recently, the minute a person hits their first time for parole, they're out the door.
Oh.
And so if it says 40 years, you're going to get out.
Who
So
appoints
when
the
you go,
parole board?
The governor.
Ah,
The governor appoints the parole board members.
question asked, question answered.
And so with this, when you go back to this wife, the individual has been in prison so long that that he will be released. That's not, when it comes up for parole, most likely he will be released. And there's not, we can make the argument, but when the judge says I'm not going to sentence to life without parole, that's all we could do. And that was because of 5 Supreme Court justices who decided to make that rule change on their own.
Well, Leanne, my sentiments exactly. Yikes.
Well, and these are for, you talk about they're for 19-year-old and 20-year-olds at the time, and oftentimes these cases, we have 2 of them in Livingston County, and the dates of offense are old. We're back from 88 is when one of them was sentenced, 1993 I think is another one of the sentences. So, like Doug had pointed out, these are families who have been able to rest easy knowing that, again, their loved one couldn't be brought back, but they had some closure at the time where you've gone through the court system, and it's not an easy system to go through, especially when, there have been first-degree murder charges, and now they have to relive all of that trauma again. I don't know, are you familiar with any specific instances that have happened as a result of this decision?
That's interesting because I was actually speaking to the Iosco County prosecutor today, and he pointed out that MDOC had decided to send one of these juvenile lifers up to a cheap hotel in his community, even though there was no relation of this parolee to the community, to the county. And now he's got 2 dead bodies, a murder and a couple additional shootings in a county that, for him, never had these things never happened. And it's all because, this juvenile lifer was placed into his community.
Yeah, this is, and you think of this is, you have 6 of them, we have 2 of them, and you think of some of the bigger counties, the resources that are going to be necessary for prosecutors to secure these sentences of life without parole, the amount of paperwork that is necessary for all of us as at the prosecutor's level to go in and defend these life without parole sentences, it's enormous. And it's just unfortunate. I think from the bench, they have changed the law, and I don't think that is appropriate.
I totally agree. That's the legislature's job, and that should have been the Supreme Court's responsibility to say the legislature needs to change it. Instead, they chose to become lawmakers themselves.
Wow, that's incredible. All right, I have one more question for you, and it's not so much, the AG is, you're right, you have 400 people underneath you that work. So let me ask you this, describe your leadership style to me. What kind of leader, what's your leadership style? How do you lead people?
It's an interesting question, because I think that as I've gotten older, my leadership style has changed. The first thing is really that, my office understands that I've been there, done that. I've done all these things. I know how to do these things. And so when you come to me and you talk to me, it's not going to be something that I've thought about in theory. I've actually been there and done that. And as I've gotten older to, and I don't know, maybe my staff is going to disagree, I'm a little more introspective and quiet. I want to give people a chance to do the right thing. I think Carolyn can agree. Prosecutors now are having to bring in younger attorneys. The experienced attorneys aren't there anymore. But I want these young attorneys to be our future. I want them to be the future prosecutors, which means we have to give them the opportunity to grow. Mm-hmm. We have to give them the opportunity to learn. We have to allow them to do things. And so for me in my office, it's one of the reasons that I'm comfortable running for Attorney General. My office knows my philosophies. They know the philosophies of Eaton County. They know what's expected. But do I need to micromanage them? No. They know their job. They know how to do their job. My young attorneys, as they figure their jobs out, they have me, whose phone is on 24 hours a day, and they have other members in my office to work with. So for me, it's leading from the front. I want them to know who I am. I want them to know what I can do, what's been done, but that I don't need them to, I don't need to do it. Obviously, being a good leader means that I'm going to hand some of those reins over to you, and I'm going to allow you to do your job. I have a feeling that we have seen, and when you talk to your local law enforcement, of, hey, are you frustrated with the length of time it takes for something to be handled in the Attorney General's office? I think that's happening because those reins are held so tight that the movement can't happen. And if you can't trust your people to do the job, then why are those people there?
Well, that's well said, well said. All right, well, you have anything else to add to our interview, our opening, our kickoff of your official public kickoff of your journey here?
No, I mean, other than to say Mark points out he is a precinct
I was going to close with that, yeah. So we're in good hands, Mark and Wayne County.
And, and understanding that, it comes down to when you think about this and, getting into state politics, right? You start to figure this out, that there's like 7,000 delegates around the state, and then you go to your county convention, and that gets weeded down to that certain number that's going to get to the state party convention, and it comes down to about 2,200. So there's 2,200 of you that 7,000, and weeding down to 2,200, and so I'll say hello right now, and just say that my goal over these next few months is to get out and actually meet the people I want them to get to know me, and I'm available. Please feel free to email me, reach out however you want, and ask me questions and talk to me. That's how you get to know me. I think my citizens in Eaton County over the years have learned who I am and learned what I stand for. But for me, it's really, you do the right thing when nobody's watching. That's the simplest way to put it. It's
called integrity.
Yes, and that's really, that's the simplest thing that I can add is that, I don't want to be on the TV with you every day, but I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing for the citizens of Michigan.
David Hewitt wants to know how he can help in Emmett County. So,
we just lost David Hewitt, who used to live in Livingston County.
I knew that name was familiar.
I've known him since I've probably been a little kid. David Hewitt and I go back to elementary school, so I'm so happy to hear him that he wants to help you from Emmett County.
Well, David, do you have David's number?
I absolutely do.
David, if you don't mind, I'm going to have Carolyn share your number, because I also, too, am up and around that area occasionally, and so I would love to reach out and talk to you.
Leanne's also a delegate and has her vote if she's blessed to go. Where are you, Leanne? What county? So, well, that's good to know. It's good to see that you're impressing our viewers here.
We have a great leader here that will lead from Lansing as an attorney general with amazing experience, working with law enforcement, understanding the state of Michigan in general. And I'm so thankful you joined us here tonight. I was so excited to hear that you're running for attorney general, and thank you for doing this. This is huge. I am so happy to have you as a candidate.
Leanne's here in Livingston, which we are known for Leanne Blajeski. Okay, what is this Luigi nonsense? I knew that wasn't right. Leanne Blajeski. Okay, good to see you, Leanne. And I'm glad that you. Leanne's a longtime Republican here with us. So we just to introduce you to Livingston County a little bit. You might know Mike, you might know Carolyn, but Livingston County is the land of the red. Well, we are a red yes, county, and I was talking to Mike Cox here not too long ago, and I said, you're gonna need us, right? He says, it was Livingston County that won the Attorney General race for me when I won. He said, it was a neck and neck thing, and Livingston County came in and did the job. And I said, well, I suspect that's going to happen again for all of you. So don't be afraid to come out here. Now I have a policy here that my childhood nickname was Luigi. Sorry, I squirreled off. All right, I wondered where that came from. All right, you know that you now will always be known as Luigi to us. You just done it. So, but anyway, we have a policy, or I have a policy here at the party, that if you come on the podcast as an elected official within 90 days, at your convenience, we will have a meet and greet for you, in-person meet and greet. So let's get in touch about that. We'll have some weeknight 5 to 7, 5:30 to 7:30 here at the office. We'll have hors d'oeuvres and beverages and things, and people can come and meet you and ask questions and whatnot. So make sure you get me a date so we can get you back out here to do some face-to-face to some of our fine folks. And Mark, you're invited. You can come too.
So, and I know we have our meetings as well.
That's
I know
right.
I've been absent because I've been participating in the Citizens Academy that's run by Mike Murphy,
Yes.
Sheriff Mike Murphy. It's such a great class. I would highly recommend anybody
It's kind of
to take
like Leadership Livingston, whittled to the sheriff.
Yes, but I would love to have you join us, Doug, for our meeting, our Republican Party meeting. I would absolutely introduce you to some amazing people, some fellow Republicans in Livingston County.
Love to have you.
Well, Deb, I just gotta, this is great. First podcast, as a candidate for Attorney General, and when Carolyn, texted me and said, "Hey, you interested?" I happened to look, and I'm like, "Wow, that's the day I'm planning on filing." So when I told Carolyn that, there was a reason I was supposed to be on this show, and Livingston County's got a lot of great things. As I told Carolyn, I want to go find a Coney dog when we're done here. So that's one of the things I want to do. But yes, I'd love to come back. That's my goal, is to get around the state, the whole state, including people who may see this from the UP. It's my goal to get up there as well. And
awesome.
I've talked to all the UP prosecutors, and surprisingly enough, a majority of the UP is actually red up there, and so
you're talking. Like I said, you're talking. I worked for legislators up in the UP. I know the area.
And so that really is a thing, and I want to get out and meet the delegates and just show them why I am the logical choice to send on to the general election.
Perfect. All right. Well, again, thanks for joining us. Thanks for announcing on our show. That was the highlight of my week when Carolyn said he's going to announce on your show. Woo! That's all right. So you heard it here, folks. Doug Lloyd, he's Eaton County Prosecutor, announced just a little while ago, right on the show, that he is running for Attorney General. So keep your eyes out for him, and keep your eyes out for our calendar and our Facebook page and future podcasts when we give you a date when you get to come out and shake the man's hand in person. So good night. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Doug, for coming on. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next Tuesday.